A young man steps into the ring to fight like he usually does. To all the spectator, it seems like a normal boxing match. But behind the scenes lies a whole different story. Unbeknownst to everyone, matches have been decided before the bell even rings. Junk Dog is sick of being stuck in a hole of rigged games and longs for a real fight. One that has no predetermined winner. While on a drive, he also runs into Yukiko Shirato, who runs the world's biggest boxing tournament, Megalonia.
Junk Dog challenges her bodyguard Yuri to a fight in the hopes of getting to experience a real fight. But before things can escalate, Yukiko stops them.
With the ordeal in the past, Junk gets ready for his next fight. But all of a sudden, Yuri bursts onto the building and steps into the ring in an attempt to finish what they started. Nanbu tries to stop the match, but is overruled by the head of the ring. Since the world champion is fighting some nobody, he gives Junk a handicap by only using one hand to fight. Junk soon takes the offensive and reflexively makes Yuri use his other hand. While the champion is surprised,
he's the best for a reason,
and knocks Junk out before the first round even ends. Before Yuri leaves, he tells Junk that if he wants to fight him again, he's gonna need to work his way up and meet him in a proper Megalonia match. While pondering the fight, he runs into a billboard that gives him his inspiration to join Megalonia as your average Joe. Finally finding a goal, he stops holding back and fights his matches with full force. Junk eventually manages to get a forged ID and in return will pay when he wins Megalonia. With Joe ranked as the lowest, he challenges the highest ranks he can and attempts to climb as fast as possible. As they visit a factory in search of better gear, a group of kids enter with a bag of stolen goods. A fight between the kids and the shopkeeper eventually breaks out, which leads to Joe getting thrown out. While Joe starts his training, he's confronted by Sachio, one of the boys who got into a fight, and asks Joe and Nanbu to take him to Megalonia. When they refuse, he breaks into Goskino, but gets caught. Hearing the news, the group goes to rescue him. Although Joe's gear breaks during the fight, he still beats his opponent and eventually decides to take Sachio with them. When Joe enters his first match, everyone is shocked that he isn't wearing a gear, and that he was nicknamed Gearless Joe. Once the fight starts, Joe gets downed until the 9th count. Fortunately, Shark starts to get frustrated and fouls Joe and continues to dodge the relentless flurry of attacks. Joe eventually spots a chance and slams a heavy right into the chin and knocks him out, taking his first win. Joe would go on to win 2 more fights and climbs to rank 102 while also building his reputation as a gearless underdog. Nanbu heads over to meet Joe's 4th opponent, only to find out that it's an old friend who suffered major burns to his face. It turns out that Joe's next match will be against Aragaki, Nanbu's old student who was deployed to the military. Although he lost both his legs to an explosive trap, he had lived and eventually returned, only to find the gym he once called home had been demolished. Nanbu had watched a news report that had claimed Aragaki had been killed in action. Due to Nanbu's breaking his promise, Aragaki intends to show no mercy and destroy Joe in their match. Nanbu finds out that Aragaki ain't joking when he said destroy, as his past matches had all left his opponents in critical condition. Despite the warning, Joe doesn't back down from the fight. Once the bell rings, the two seem equally matched. But one blow is all Aragaki needs to knock Joe to the ground. Joe gets up at the last second, and the match continues. Nanbu almost throws in the towel, but is stopped by Joe, and starts to fight as Nanbu had taught him. Aragaki notices and becomes enraged, and makes a mistake that costs him a lot of damage, as Joe lands a solid hit that nearly knocks him out. blow after blow, the fight continues, but before the 5th round starts,
Aragaki concedes.
the two old friends talk in the locker room after the fight, and Aragaki reveals that this was his last fight, as his leg injury is too much to handle, and he returns the failed betting slip that kept him from killing himself. Yukiko announces that Glenn Burroughs has earned the 3rd card in Megalonia, yet the media is more curious about how the now famous gearless Joe came to be. While on the surface, she claims that anyone can join, Yuri has a plan to prevent him from making it into Megalonia. While Joe gains more attention, he still isn't likely to be chosen for Megalonia. Yukiko's brother Mikio beats Sugar and announces that he would fight Joe. The Shirato Group's executive committee urges Yukiko to put Mikio in Megalonia, but she has a different plan, and she doesn't want her brother to get any further. Before the two fight, they meet and reveal the dirt that he has on Joe. Once the time to fight comes, Joe never shows up, and Mikio is given the title of the last finalist to enter Megalonia. Nanbu notices that he never exposed Joe's identity to the public and tries to find some information that will force a rematch. It turns out that Mikio's gear could read the other gear, and it was an attempt to best Yuri's integrated gear. Although Nanbu tries to request a rematch, he's locked in a room, and the ceremony would continue without interruption. That is, until Joe shows up. Joe demands a fair fight, and Yukiko rips the last ticket in half, giving one each. It's a winner-take-all match for the last spot. The fight starts off and Joe is on the defensive as Mikio's gear has been upgraded to learn all kinds of Joe's habits and moves. After taking hits for a while, Joe decides to do something unthinkable and he drops his guard. While normally that would be a death wish, it works in Joe's favor, as his unusual behavior confuses the gear's program and prevents him from delivering a devastating blow before the bell rings. Joe, figuring out his gimmick, allows him to fully focus and land a solid counterpunch, ending the match and earning his spot in Megalonia. Old habits die hard, and it turns out that the real bet Nanbu made was for Joe to throw the match when he reached the semifinals. Furious that Nanbu is throwing Joe under the bus to save his own skin and clogs him and rides off. It turns out that the stakes are much higher. If Joe doesn't throw the match, then all three of them will die. Nanbu did some digging into Sachio's past, and it turns out that his father created the prototype for Yuri's integrated gear, but the research was stolen. Nanbu offers a chance to get revenge for his father, but the soft-hearted kid just can't bring himself to do it. Since he didn't want revenge, Nanbu asked Yukiko to shelter the kid, and would later also find out the truth behind his father. While that's happening, to no one's surprise, Yuri beats his opponent in the semifinal and moves on to the final round. Fujimaki's men escort Nanbu to the arena where Joe is slated to fight Glenn Burroughs in their semifinal match. Sachio refuses to go see the fight, as he assumes both abandoned him for a rigged match. As Joe appears by himself in the ring, wearing his old gear after a visit to his old friend, Nanbu instructs Joe to take a dive in the 3rd round. Nanbu attempts to instruct Joe properly in hopes that this act will repay their debt. But as Joe gets pummeled into the corner, his gear falls off, and he hits the mat. With all seeming lost, Sachio appears, yelling at Joe not to give up. With Joe downed and Sachio being taken away, Yuri shows up, and his eyes start to close. And as they do, Nanbu finally steps up as a real coach should. Tate! With a counter coming out of nowhere, he mows down Glenn and wins the match. While the two are celebrating, Nanbu is in deep trouble as one of them points a gun at him.
The two rush to the suite where Nanbu is, only to find out the price Nanbu had to pay.
Wanting to have a fair fight, Yuri decided to have his own gear removed and visits Mikio at his cabin in the woods to get his gear surgically removed. Yukiko eventually learns that Joe's ID badge is fake and has an excuse to disqualify him from the tournament. But she holds off and decides to visit Yuri, who is slowly recovering from the pain of the surgery. She then meets Joe by the riverbank and tells him that she knows about his fake ID. Unlike her brother, she won't stop his fight with Yuri, as she can't understand what made Yuri want to take such drastic action to fight him. Joe and Yuri have their rematch in the finals of Megalonia, as Yuri enters the ring with his gear removed to fight Joe on equal terms. Meanwhile, Yukiko tries to deal with her military clients who want to customize her gear for weapons development, but she chafes at the idea. Though the recovery from surgery has depleted Yuri's stamina, he continues matching Joe blow for blow. Both of them equally matched, and that match goes for so long that Yuri struggles to sip from his own water bottle after 12 rounds. In the 13th round, both fighters bet everything on one last punch.
自分は今何をしてる?
With the match over, Nanbu opened a new boxing gym, and the next Megalonia tournament is about to begin, with the original winner having vacated their title. Yuri is confined to a wheelchair, and Joe later stops by the gym on his bike to deliver a couple of packages. As the happy scene comes to a close, the end card finally shows us what happened on that fateful day.